After the apocalypse, his food stall has everything, surrounded by hungry alien girls offering him. The scorched sky of Proxima 9 never truly cleared. Perpetual dust clouds, remnants of the Great War that had ravaged the once thriving colony world, filtered the twin red suns into a permanent blood-orange twilight. It was in this harsh glow that Morgan Reed hammered the final nail into his makeshift sign. Reed's Eats, open for business. Morgan wiped sweat from his brow, his muscular forearm glistening in the eerie light. At 35, he was a specimen of human resilience. Broad-shouldered and robust, with dark blonde hair that refused to stay in place, and a stubble he'd given up trying to tame months ago. His worn green vest exposed arms hardened by years of survival, and his fingerless gloves bore the stains of 100 different worlds. "You're insane, you know that?" called a voice from behind him. Morgan turned to see Kel, the only other human within 50 parsecs, leaning against a twisted metal beam. The older man's weathered face crinkled with concern. "Probably," Morgan agreed, adjusting the portable fusion generator that powered his cooking equipment. "But insanity's a luxury in short supply these days. Might as well corner the market." Kel shook his head. "Opening a food stall in the middle of nowhere? The locals can barely afford to breathe, let alone eat." Morgan shrugged. "Everyone's got to eat, Kel. Even broke folks. These aren't folks, Reed. They're aliens. Different biology, different needs." "Humanoid enough," Morgan countered, gesturing to the ramshackle settlement sprawling below his chosen hilltop. "I've studied their digestive systems. They can process most of what I can cook." "And how do you expect them to pay? Credits are worthless out here." Morgan's eyes hardened slightly. "I'll figure something out. Trade, barter." "Oh, they'll offer to barter, all right," Kel snorted. "Especially the females. You've seen how they look at you. Only human male for light years, and you're built like a damn hero from those old vids." Morgan busied himself with arranging his limited stock. Canned goods salvaged from crashed supply ships. Dried proteins and the vegetables he'd somehow coaxed from the toxic soil. "I'm not interested in that kind of trade." "Noble," Kel said, not sounding convinced. "Just watch yourself. Desperation makes people do crazy things, even non-people." As Kel departed, Morgan surveyed his domain. A 15-foot counter, 3 cooking surfaces, and a storage area protected by a force field he'd rigged from scavenged military tech. It wasn't much, but it was his. The first business to open since the apocalyptic conflict had reduced Proxima 9 to a wasteland. The first customer arrived just as Morgan finished prepping. A thin, blue-skinned humanoid with 4 arms and large, wary eyes approached the counter. "Is this food?" she asked in halting standard, pointing at Morgan's setup. "Yes, ma'am," Morgan replied with a genuine smile. "What can I get you?" The alien seemed startled by his friendliness. "I have no credits." "What do you have?" She hesitantly placed a small mechanical component on the counter. "Power converter. Still works." Morgan examined it. "This is military grade. Worth more than a meal." Her large eyes blinked rapidly. "I am very hungry." Morgan nodded, understanding. "Then you'll get more than one meal." He fired up a burner and began preparing a simple but hearty stew, adding spices he'd carefully preserved from Earth. Word spread quickly. By sunset, a line had formed, mostly female aliens of various species, all thin, all hungry, all clutching whatever items they thought might buy them food. Morgan worked tirelessly, cooking, serving, and refusing only the most personal offers of payment with gentle but firm redirection. As the second sun dipped below the horizon, Morgan noticed her, standing apart from the others, watching. Her skin was a deep emerald green, her hair a cascade of shimmering silver. Unlike the others, whose clothing was practical and worn, she wore a tight black bodysuit that seemed out of place in the dusty settlement. Their eyes met across the distance, and Morgan felt an unexpected jolt of something? Interest? Warning. He couldn't tell. She didn't approach that first day. But Morgan knew she would eventually. Everyone did when hunger became too much to bear. Dawn on Proxima 9 was hardly distinguishable from dusk, The same blood-orange haze, the same dust devils dancing across the barren landscape. Morgan had been awake for hours, inventorying his supplies and planning the day's menu. His stall had been open for 3 days now, and word had spread through the settlement like wildfire. The line formed earlier each morning. Morgan worked methodically, exchanging food for whatever the locals could offer. Spare parts, scavenged tech, occasionally information. He'd already compiled a mental map of the settlement's power grid, water sources, and danger zones just from conversations over his counter. "You're becoming quite the intelligence hub," he muttered to himself as he chopped what passed for vegetables on this world. Purple tubers with a taste somewhere between potatoes and turnips. A shadow fell across his cutting board. Morgan looked up, knife pausing mid-chop. She stood before him, the emerald-skinned woman he'd noticed that first day. Up close, her features were even more striking. High cheekbones, almond-shaped eyes with vertical pupils, and that silver hair that seemed to capture and reflect even the dim light of Proxima 9. Her black bodysuit was worn but clean, clinging to a figure that was undeniably feminine, despite its alien nature. "You've been watching me," Morgan said, resuming his chopping. "Yes." Her voice was melodic, with an accent that made Standard sound almost musical. "You are unusual," Morgan smiled. "I've been called worse." "I am Syra," she said, placing both palms flat on his counter. A traditional greeting among her kind, he learned. "Morgan Reed." He wiped his hands and returned the gesture, his large palms dwarfing hers. Her skin was cool to the touch, with a subtle texture like fine suede. Their hands lingered a moment longer than necessary. Morgan felt that jolt again, definitely interest this time. He cleared his throat. "What can I get you, Sarah?" Her eyes, a deep violet against her green skin, held his. "Information first, food second." Morgan raised an eyebrow. "Most folks prefer the other way around." "I am not most folks." She glanced around, then leaned closer. "The V-Rex clan is planning to raid your supplies tonight. 6 warriors, armed with sonic disruptors." Morgan's expression didn't change, but his mind raced. The Vrex were notorious, a faction that had thrived in the chaos after the war, taking what they needed through force. "Why tell me this?" he asked, studying her face for deception. "Because you feed people without demanding what others would." Her eyes flickered downward momentarily. "It is honorable." Morgan nodded slowly. "And what do you want in return for this warning?" "Food, of course." A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "And perhaps conversation. It has been long since I spoke with someone who did not want something from me." There was something in her tone, a vulnerability beneath the confidence, that resonated with Morgan. He prepared a hearty stew, adding extra spices and a rare protein supplement he'd been saving. "This is more than information is worth," Sarah said as he placed the bowl before her. "Consider it an investment in future intelligence," Morgan replied with a wink. She ate with the controlled desperation of someone long accustomed to hunger. Morgan continued serving others, but found his attention repeatedly drawn to her, and when their eyes met, neither looked away immediately. There was an undeniable current between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits in this wasteland. When she finished eating, Sarah didn't leave. Instead, she moved to the side of the counter and watched him work. Occasionally, she would point out something about a customer, which clan they belonged to, whether they could be trusted. As the day progressed, Morgan found himself enjoying her company. She was sharp, observant, with a dry wit that matched his own. And yes, he was attracted to her. The realization didn't surprise him as much as he thought it might. Human or alien, some connections transcended biology. "You should close early today," Sarah advised as the first sun began to set. "Prepare for tonight." Morgan nodded, beginning to pack up his equipment. "I have defenses," he said quietly. "Military grade." "The V-Rex have military deserters among them," she countered. "Then I could use an extra pair of eyes." Morgan hesitated, then added, "If you're offering..." Sarah's violet eyes held his. "I am." They worked together to secure the stall, Morgan explaining his defensive measures, while Sarah suggested improvements based on her knowledge of Rex tactics. Their hands brushed occasionally, lingering longer each time. The air between them grew charged with unspoken possibility. As darkness fell, they retreated to Morgan's shelter, a repurposed transport pod nestled against the hillside behind his stall. It was small but secure, with a reinforced door and a single window overlooking the settlement below. Not much, Morgan apologized, activating the interior lights, but it's home. Sarah moved through the space with fluid grace, examining his few possessions. It is more than most have. Why help me, Sarah? Morgan asked, watching her. Really? She turned to face him, silver hair catching the light. Perhaps I am tired of surviving at the expense of others. Perhaps... She moved closer. I find you fascinating. The word hung between them, laden with meaning. Morgan felt his pulse quicken as she stepped closer still. Humans are rare here, she continued, her voice softer. You are different from stories I have heard. How so? Morgan's voice had grown husky. Kinder? Stronger? Her hand reached up, fingers hovering near his stubbled cheek. More appealing. Morgan caught her hand gently. Sarah, if the wrecks are coming, they will not arrive for hours yet. Her eyes held his, a question in them. We have time. The moment between Morgan and Sarah hung suspended in the dim light of the shelter, charged with possibility. Her fingers finally made contact with his stubbled cheek, tracing a line to his jaw. Morgan's breath caught as he felt the subtle difference in her touch, slightly cooler than human skin, with a gentleness that belied her strength. Your species has an interesting response to danger, Sarah murmured, her violet eyes studying his face. Increased heart rate, dilated pupils. That's not just danger, Morgan replied, his voice low. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. No? Before he could respond, a sharp beeping cut through the moment. Morgan's security perimeter had been breached. Damn it, he growled, moving quickly to the small console embedded in the wall. The display showed thermal signatures approaching from the south, at least 8 figures moving with military precision. They're early, and there's more than you said. Sarah was instantly alert, all traces of seduction vanishing. That's not the Vrex pattern. They're too organized. Morgan's eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical display. You're right. This is a professional unit. He reached beneath his cot and pulled out a locked case, pressing his thumb to the biometric scanner. It clicked open, revealing a compact pulse rifle and sidearm. Sarah's eyes widened. You're not just a cook. And I'm guessing you're not just a hungry local, Morgan countered, checking the weapon's charge. Special Forces, 3rd Interstellar Division, he added, answering her unspoken question. I didn't come to this hellhole just for the scenery. Colonial intelligence, Sarah admitted, a new respect in her eyes. Embedded to monitor post-war factions. Morgan handed her the sidearm. Looks like we've both been holding out. The Vrex raid was real, she insisted. But this, she gestured toward the display. This is something else. Syndicate, Morgan said grimly. Has to be. They control the supply chains in this sector. A successful independent food operation threatens their monopoly. And their information network, Sarah added. Your stall has become a hub for more than meals? A sudden explosion rocked the shelter, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. The security display flickered, then stabilized, showing the attackers had breached the outer perimeter. So much for getting to know each other better, Morgan muttered, moving to a defensive position by the window. Sarah took up position on the opposite side. I find this quite illuminating, actually. Their eyes met, and despite the danger, they shared a brief smile, a moment of connection in the chaos. The next explosion hit closer, and Morgan caught sight of the attackers, humanoid figures in matte black armor, moving with coordinated efficiency. They're after the supplies, Sarah said, peering through the gloom. Let's give them something else to think about. Morgan activated a remote detonator. A series of controlled explosions erupted along the hillside, triggering his pre-placed defensive measures. 2 attackers went down immediately. Sarah fired with impressive accuracy, dropping another. Not bad for a cook, she said with a sideways glance. Not bad for a spy, he returned, taking out a 4th attacker with a clean shot. They fell into a rhythm, covering each other, communicating with glances and brief gestures as if they'd fought together for years. Morgan found himself impressed by her skill and precision, and more attracted than ever. The remaining attackers pulled back, regrouping behind a ridge of twisted metal. "They'll flank us," Sierra warned, ejecting a spent power cell and slapping in a fresh one. "That's what they think," Morgan replied with a grim smile. He pressed another sequence on his wrist control. The ground beneath the ridge erupted in a shower of dirt and debris as buried mines detonated. "You've been planning for this," Sarah realized. "I've been at war too long not to prepare for every contingency." Morgan's voice held a weariness that spoke of years of combat. "Why here?" she asked, scanning for movement outside. "Why a food stall of all things?" Morgan was silent for a moment. "Because people need to eat more than they need to fight, I thought maybe I could do some good for once. Build something instead of destroying." The sincerity in his voice touched something in Syra. In the brief lull, she moved closer to him, her hand finding his. "That's not the typical human military mindset I've encountered." "Maybe you haven't met the right humans," Morgan said softly. Their eyes locked, and for a moment the battle outside faded away. Sarah leaned in, her lips finding his in a kiss that bridged their different worlds. It was tentative at first, then deepened as they explored this new territory between them. Her lips were softer than he expected, with a faint taste of spice that was uniquely her. The moment was shattered by a new alarm, movement from the north. Morgan reluctantly pulled away, checking the display. "More company," he said. "But this signature is different." Sarah looked over his shoulder. "The VRX," she confirmed. "Right on schedule." Morgan laughed, a genuine sound of amusement that surprised them both. Perfect timing. Let's see what happens when two enemy forces collide. As they watched, the VRX raiders engaged the Syndicate forces, unaware they were interrupting a different operation. The night erupted in weapons, fire, and chaos. "Divide and conquer," Sarah murmured appreciatively. Morgan turned to her, his expression serious despite the small smile playing at his lips. "When this is over, we should continue our intelligence sharing." Sarah's violet eyes gleamed in the darkness. "I believe that would be mutually beneficial." Dawn broke over Proxima 9, the dust-choked sky turning from black to its perpetual blood orange. Morgan stood at the edge of what remained of his defensive perimeter, surveying the aftermath. Bodies of Syndicate operatives and Vrex raiders lay scattered across the scorched earth, their weapons and armor already stripped by opportunistic scavengers. "Your security measures were impressive," Sarah said, joining him. She'd changed from her bodysuit into one of Morgan's spare shirts, the human-sized garment hanging loose on her slender frame. The sight of her in his clothing stirred something primal in Morgan's chest. "Military habit," he replied, eyes lingering on her before returning to the battlefield. "Always prepare for the worst. And yet you chose to open a food stall?" She moved closer, her shoulder brushing his arm. "A curious choice for a special forces operative." Morgan smiled faintly. "Food brings people together, weapons just keep them apart." Before Sarah could respond, they noticed movement in the settlement below. A procession of locals was making its way up the hillside toward them. A diverse group of alien species, led by an elderly, blue-skinned male Morgan recognized as one of his regular customers. "Looks like we have company," Morgan murmured, instinctively checking his sidearm. "Not hostile," Sarah assessed. "They're carrying offerings?" Indeed, each member of the approaching group carried something. Containers, mechanical parts, bundles of cloth. The elderly alien, Dren, reached them first, his forearms raised in a gesture of peace. "Food giver," he addressed Morgan formally. "The settlement has witnessed your defense against the raiders and the Syndicate. You protected not only your supplies but our homes from their crossfire." Morgan shook his head. "I was protecting my own interests." "Nevertheless," Dren continued, "the Council of Elders has convened an emergency session. We wish you to address us." Morgan exchanged a glance with Sarah, who gave a subtle nod. "What's this about?" he asked Dren. The elder hesitated. "There are rumors about what lies beneath your stall." Morgan's expression remained neutral, but his mind raced. "And what rumors would those be?" "That the hill you chose is not merely a hill," Dren said carefully. "That it contains a sealed bunker from before the war. A repository of technology that could change everything. That explains the Syndicate's interest, Sierra said quietly to Morgan. They weren't just eliminating competition. The procession had reached them now, and one by one, the settlers placed their offerings at Morgan's feet. Food supplements, mechanical components, medical supplies. A young female with iridescent scales stepped forward, placing a data crystal in Morgan's palm. My father was an engineer before the war, she said. These are his scans of the underground structures in this region. Your hill? It's different from the others. Morgan examined the crystal, then pocketed it. Thank you. I'll look into this. As the settlers dispersed, Morgan turned to Syra. Looks like our morning just got complicated. Back in the shelter, they reviewed the data crystal on Morgan's portable terminal. The scans revealed an extensive complex beneath the hill, reinforced walls, power conduits, and a sealed entrance that had been buried by war debris. This is a colonial command bunker, Sarah said, studying the schematics. Top-tier security, designed to withstand orbital bombardment. And I've been cooking on top of it, Morgan chuckled, shaking his head. No wonder the Syndicate sent a professional team. They'll send more, Sarah warned, and next time it won't be foot soldiers. Commander Thax handles high-value acquisitions personally. Morgan's head snapped up. Thax? Grell Thax? Sarah's violet eyes narrowed. You know him? We've met, Morgan said grimly. Nick's campaign 5 years ago. My unit was sent to extract a colonial governor he was holding for ransom. It didn't end well for his people. That explains his interest in more than just the bunker, Sarah said. This is personal for him. Morgan ran a hand through his tousled hair. Great, a vendetta and a secret bunker. Just what my food business needed. Sarah stepped closer, her hand finding his. You're not alone in this, Morgan. The simple touch sent electricity through him. Last night's interrupted kiss lingered between them, a promise unfulfilled. Morgan turned to face her fully, his free hand coming up to brush a strand of silver hair from her face. Why are you still here, Sarah? Your cover's blown. Colonial intelligence would extract you. Perhaps I've found something worth staying for, she replied, her eyes holding his. Something more important than orders. Morgan's throat tightened. I'm just a cook, remember? A cook who fights like a warrior, she countered, stepping closer until their bodies nearly touched. A human who treats aliens with dignity when most of your kind see us as inferior. Not all humans think that way, Morgan said softly. No, she agreed, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. You've shown me that. This time when they kissed, there was no interruption. Morgan's arms encircled her waist, pulling her against him as her hands slid up his chest to his shoulders. The differences in their physiology, her cooler skin, the subtle texture, only heightened the sensation. Their kiss deepened, months of isolation and loneliness dissolving in the heat between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Sarah's violet eyes had darkened with desire. Your species has interesting customs, she murmured against his lips. I've got more I could show you, Morgan replied with a roguish grin. What followed was a discovery of similarities and differences, an exploration of uncharted territory for both of them. Their coming together was tender yet passionate, a bridge between worlds built on mutual respect and growing affection. Afterward, as they lay entwined on Morgan's narrow cot, Sarah traced patterns on his chest. My people have a belief, she said softly, that when two souls find each other across the void, it is because they were meant to change the universe together. Morgan caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. I'm not sure about changing the universe. I'd settle for improving this corner of it. A ping from the console interrupted the moment. The settlement's proximity sensors had detected an approaching vessel, a sleek, black ship bearing Syndicate markings. Thax, Sierra said, instantly alert. Morgan nodded grimly. Round 2 begins. We need to access that bunker before Thax lands, Morgan said, pulling on his vest. The proximity sensors estimated they had less than 2 hours before the Syndicate ship reached their position. Sarah nodded, slipping back into her bodysuit. The entrance is likely beneath your stall. The foundation must have been built directly over the access point. Hiding in plain sight, Morgan mused. Smart. They hurried outside to find the settlement in a flurry of activity. Word of the approaching Syndicate vessel had spread, and rather than fleeing, the locals were converging on Morgan's hill. Dren stood directing the efforts, his four arms gesturing emphatically as aliens of various species carried makeshift barriers and weapons. "What's all the?" Morgan asked, approaching the elder. "Defense preparations," Dren replied matter-of-factly. "The Syndicate has exploited us for too long. Your stand against them has given us, what do humans call it, backbone?" Morgan exchanged a surprised glance with Sarah. "I appreciate the sentiment, but Thax isn't coming with a raiding party. He's bringing a warship." "Then we'd better find something in that bunker to even the odds," Sarah interjected. "We need to clear the area beneath the stall." The settlers immediately set to work, dismantling Morgan's counter and cooking equipment with surprising efficiency. Beneath the portable fusion generator, they discovered a metal plate embedded in the rocky ground, its surface covered with decades of dust and debris. "Colonial military marking," Morgan observed, brushing away the grime to reveal a faded insignia. "This is it." The plate had no obvious opening mechanism. Morgan ran his fingers along the edge, searching for a seam or control panel. "It's biometrically sealed," Sarah said, examining the markings. "Keyed to Colonial Command Staff DNA." Morgan grinned. Good thing they made those Special Forces genetic modifications official. He pressed his palm against the central insignia. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a soft hum emanated from beneath the plate, and it slid sideways, revealing a dark passage with stairs leading down. "Sometimes it pays to be human," Morgan winked at Sarah. "Show off," she replied with a smile that made his heart race. They descended into darkness, emergency lights flickering to life as they detected movement. The stairway led to a reinforced door that also responded to Morgan's palm print. Beyond lay a command center frozen in time, consoles covered in dust, chairs still positioned as if their occupants had just stepped away. "They evacuated in a hurry," Sarah observed, running a finger through the dust on a tactical display. Morgan moved to the central console and activated it. The system hummed to life, holographic displays flickering and stabilizing around them. "Full power after all these years," he murmured. "These places were built to last." "Morgan, look at this," Sarah called from a side room. He joined her to find what appeared to be a laboratory. Dominating the center was a large machine with transparent chambers and control panels. "Is that what I think it is?" Morgan asked, eyes widening. "Molecular resequencer," Sarah confirmed, her voice hushed with awe. "Military-grade food replication technology. It can convert base organic matter into nutritionally complete meals." Morgan let out a low whistle. "No wonder I felt drawn to this spot for my stall. The universe has a sense of humor." "This could end hunger on Proxima 9, Sarah said, turning to him with shining eyes. "Your food stall really could have everything." Morgan's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Our food stall?" The moment was charged with possibility, not just between them, but for the entire settlement. In Sarah's violet eyes, Morgan saw a future he hadn't dared imagine since arriving on this desolate world. A warning klaxon from the command center broke the spell. They rushed back to find the tactical display showing Thax's ship entering the atmosphere ahead of schedule. "He's moving faster than expected," Sarah said, studying the readout. "And he's brought friends." Two smaller craft flanked the main vessel, combat shuttles designed for ground assault. "Time to see what else this bunker has to offer," Morgan said grimly, accessing the defense systems. To his surprise, the bunker was better equipped than he'd hoped. Automated turrets, shield generators, and even a short-range ion cannon. "Colonial Command didn't mess around," he muttered, activating the systems one by one. "The settlers are still up there," Sarah reminded him. "Exposed." Morgan nodded. "We need to extend the shields to cover the hill." His fingers flew over the controls, reconfiguring the defense grid. "And we need to get that replicator working. If we're going to make a stand, these people need to be fed." They worked quickly, Morgan on the defenses, while Sarah brought the replicator online. When they emerged from the bunker, 20 minutes later, they found the hill transformed into a fortified position. The settlers had erected barricades using debris and salvaged Syndicate armor, positioned according to Dren's surprisingly sound tactical judgment. "Your people have been busy," Morgan remarked to the elder. "We learn quickly," Dren replied, "especially when properly motivated." Morgan addressed the gathered settlers, who now numbered over 50. "There's a food replicator in the bunker. It's operational. No one on this planet will go hungry again." A murmur of amazement rippled through the crowd. "But first," Morgan continued, "we need to deal with our visitors. The bunker's defenses are online, but they won't be enough against Thax's forces. We need every able body on those barricades." To his surprise, there was no hesitation. The settlers, many of whom were females who had once offered themselves in exchange for food, now stood ready to fight alongside him. Sarah stepped forward. "The Syndicate thinks you're weak because you've been hungry. They think you'll run or surrender." Her voice carried across the hilltop. "Show them what happens when you stand with humanity against tyranny." A cheer went up, ragged but determined. Morgan felt a swell of pride as he watched these beings who had suffered so much, now standing tall, weapons in hand. Beside him, Sarah's fingers intertwined with his. "Your species has a remarkable ability to inspire," she said softly. "It's not just me," Morgan replied. "It's what we're fighting for, a chance to build something better." The proximity alarm sounded again. Thax's ship was beginning its final approach. "Ready?" Morgan asked, looking down at Sarah. Her emerald skin gleamed in the ruddy light as she smiled up at him. "With you. Always." Thax's warship loomed in the blood-orange sky, its black hull absorbing what little light filtered through Proxima 9's perpetual dust clouds. The combat shuttles detached from the main vessel, descending in tight formation toward Morgan's hilltop. "Defensive positions!" Morgan called out, the settlers scrambling to their barricades. He turned to Sarah. "I need to get back to the command center to coordinate the automated defenses." She nodded, checking her weapon. "I'll organize the ground forces with Dren." Morgan caught her arm before she could leave. "Be careful out here." Sarah's violet eyes softened. "You too, human." She pressed a quick kiss to his lips before darting away, already calling orders to the defenders. In the bunker's command center, Morgan activated the tactical display and began targeting the automated turrets. The first shuttle came into range, and he fired, the ion cannon sending a brilliant blue streak through the sky. The shuttle banked hard but couldn't evade completely. The blast caught its port side, sending it spiraling toward the wastelands beyond the settlement. "One down," Morgan muttered, already targeting the second. The console suddenly flashed red, warning messages scrolling across the screen. Morgan frowned, trying to override the system lockout. Nothing responded to his commands. "What the hell?" A new message appeared. "Human genetic signature detected. Countermeasure deployed." "Damn it, Thax," Morgan growled. "You've been planning this." The command center doors sealed automatically as a fine mist began spraying from ceiling vents. A targeted bioweapon designed to incapacitate humans while leaving alien biology unaffected. Morgan held his breath and scrambled for the emergency kit, pulling out a rebreather mask. He got it on just in time, but the damage was already done. His vision blurred and his limbs felt heavy. The comm unit crackled. "Morgan, the defenses are failing." Sarah's voice was tense with urgency. "Thax, deployed a anti-human countermeasure," Morgan managed, fighting the sedative effects of the bioweapon. "Can't access systems." "I'm coming down," Sarah replied immediately. "No!" Morgan forced himself to focus. "Need you to coordinate defense. Send someone else." There was a pause, then, "Understood," sending Trill. Minutes later, a young female with iridescent scales, the engineer's daughter who had given them the data crystal, rushed into the command center. She gasped at the sight of Morgan slumped against the console. "Human! What happened?" "Bioweapon, keyed to human DNA," Morgan explained, his speech slurring. "Need you to access systems. Your DNA should work." Trill nodded, quickly moving to the main console. Her scaled fingers flew across the controls, bypassing the lockout by using her alien genetic signature. The systems came back online, screens flickering to life. "It worked!" she exclaimed. "Target second shuttle," Morgan directed, fighting to stay conscious. Above ground, the battle had been joined. The remaining shuttle had landed, disgorging Syndicate troops who now engaged with the settlers in fierce combat. Sarah moved among the defenders, her colonial intelligence training evident in every precise shot and tactical command. "The human's food has made us strong," Dren shouted as he took down a Syndicate soldier with surprising strength. "We are not the same starving beings they once exploited." Sarah paused, realizing there was truth in the elder's words. The settlers were fighting with unexpected vigor and resilience. She ducked behind a barricade and activated her comm. "Trill, access the replicator's analysis logs. Check the nutritional composition of Morgan's cooking." In the command center, Trill pulled up the data while continuing to target the automated defenses. Her eyes widened as she read the results. The replicator says his food contains high concentrations of enhanced proteins and trace minerals. It's been strengthening everyone who ate it. The compounds are similar to military combat supplements, but more effective. "Was he doing it deliberately?" Sarah asked, firing over the barricade at an advancing Syndicate trooper. Morgan, still fighting the effects of the bioweapon, managed a weak laugh. "Special Forces, field nutrition training. Didn't think anyone would notice." "You've been preparing us for this all along," Sarah realized, a new admiration in her voice. "Just wanted people to be healthy," Morgan replied. "Didn't expect a war." The tide of battle was turning. The settlers, bolstered by Morgan's nutrient-enhanced meals and their own determination, pushed back against the Syndicate forces. The automated defenses, now under Trill's control, kept Thax's warship at bay, preventing it from providing air support to its ground troops. In the command center, Morgan was slowly regaining his strength as his enhanced metabolism processed the bioweapon. He directed Trill to access a secondary system, one not immediately obvious in the bunker's layout. "What is this?" she asked, activating the protocol. "Insurance," Morgan replied, his voice stronger now. "Every Colonial command bunker has a direct line to fleet headquarters. Emergency beacon. If Thax wants this technology so badly, let's make sure everyone knows about it." On the tactical display, a new signal pulsed outward from the bunker, a high-priority distress call that would reach Colonial space within hours. Above, the battle reached its climax. The Syndicate troops, realizing they were outmatched by the surprisingly resilient settlers, began retreating toward their shuttle. Sarah, seeing an opportunity, led a charge that cut off their escape route. "Surrender or die," she called out, her emerald skin gleaming with sweat and dust. The Syndicate commander, a hulking reptilian, threw down his weapon in disgust. "Thax will have your heads for this." "I don't think so," Sarah replied, pointing skyward. The warship was turning, preparing to flee. The automated defenses had scored several hits on its engines, and with the ground force captured, Thax had clearly decided to cut his losses. As the settlers secured their prisoners, Sarah rushed to the bunker. She found Morgan on his feet, pale but steady, directing Trill and locking down the remaining Syndicate systems. "We did it," she said, breathless with exhilaration. Morgan pulled her into his arms, his strength returning by the minute. "You did it. I just laid here getting poisoned." "Your food did it," she corrected, pressing against him. "Your secret ingredients made all the difference." Their eyes met, and in that moment of victory, something deeper than physical attraction passed between them. A recognition of what they could build together in this unlikely place. "So," Morgan said with a smile that reached his eyes, "about that food stall." 2 weeks after the battle, Morgan's food stall had evolved into something unrecognizable. The hilltop now bustled with activity as settlers worked to expand what they had begun calling Reed's Haven. The bunker's food replicator operated around the clock, ending hunger throughout the settlement. Morgan had trained a rotating staff of locals to operate it, insisting that everyone receive equal portions regardless of what they could offer in return. "You're ruining the economy," Kell joked as he helped Morgan install a new communications array atop the hill. The older human had returned 3 days after the battle, impressed by what he'd found. "Can't ruin what didn't exist," Morgan replied, tightening a connection. Besides, there's more to life than commerce. And like emerald-skinned intelligence officers?" Kell raised an eyebrow suggestively. Morgan's sun-bronzed face flushed slightly. His relationship with Sarah had deepened in the days following the battle. Their nights together, a passionate exploration of their differences and similarities. What had begun as mutual attraction had blossomed into something neither had expected to find on this desolate world. "She's something special," Morgan admitted. "Special enough to make you ignore that?" Kell pointed skyward, where a faint glimmer was visible even through the dust clouds, a colonial cruiser in orbit, responding to the emergency beacon. It had arrived that morning, establishing communication, but remaining in position while assessing the situation. "They want me back," Morgan said quietly. Lieutenant Commander Hale made it clear. "The war's heating up again. They need experienced operators." "And what do you need?" Kel asked. Before Morgan could answer, Trill came rushing up the hill, her iridescent scales gleaming with excitement. "Morgan, the replicator found something." She thrust a datapad into his hands. "We were analyzing those soil samples you collected, and the system identified terraforming compounds." Morgan studied the readout, his brow furrowing. "The replicator can synthesize these?" "In theory, yes," Trill nodded enthusiastically. "It would take time and energy, but the bunker's power core is still at 87% capacity after all these years. We could begin healing the planet, starting with the immediate area around the settlement." "From feeding people to feeding the planet itself," Kel mused. "You don't do anything small, do you, Reed?" Morgan was still processing this revelation when his comm unit chimed. It was Dren, his voice uncharacteristically urgent. "Human Morgan, we have detected multiple incoming vessels, not colonial signatures." "Mercenaries," Morgan realized immediately. Thax must have put out a bounty. He rushed to the command center, Kel and Trill following close behind. Sarah was already there, her silver hair tied back as she studied the tactical display. She looked up as Morgan entered, her violet eyes meeting his with a mixture of concern and determination. "6 ships, various classes," she reported, "all heavily armed. ETA 40 minutes. "And the colonial cruiser?" Morgan asked. "Still in orbit. They're hailing us now." Morgan activated the comm. The stern face of Lieutenant Commander Hale appeared on screen. A woman in her 40s with close-cropped gray hair and the hard eyes of someone who'd seen too much war. "Reed, we're picking up multiple hostile signatures approaching your position. Looks like you've stirred up a hornet's nest." "Syndicate reprisal," Morgan confirmed. "They want the bunker technology." "And you," Sarah added quietly beside him. Hale's eyes narrowed. "We can extract you immediately. The technology as well. This settlement isn't defensible against that many hostiles." Morgan felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Return to colonial service, to the life he'd known, fighting in a war that never seemed to end, or stay and defend what he'd built here, with these people who had come to rely on him. With Sarah. "What about the settlers?" he asked Hale. "Not our concern," she replied, though her expression suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with that position. "Our orders are to secure colonial assets and personnel." Morgan looked around the command center, at Trill's hopeful face, at Kel's knowing expression, at Sarah's quiet strength. Then he thought of the terraforming compounds, the possibility of healing this broken world. "I respectfully decline extraction, Commander," he said finally, "but I could use some fire support." Hale's eyebrow rose. "You're refusing orders, Reed?" "I'm requesting reassignment," Morgan countered. "This bunker is a colonial asset. It needs protection. And these people," he gestured to the settlers visible through the command center window, "they've earned our help." A long silence followed as Hale considered. Finally, she nodded curtly. "I'll need to consult with command. In the meantime, we'll maintain position." As the communication ended, Sarah moved to Morgan's side, her cool hand finding his. "You're staying," she said softly, not quite a question. "I'm staying," he confirmed, turning to face her fully. "This place, these people, you. It's become home." The emotion in her violet eyes made his heart race. She leaned up, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that conveyed everything words couldn't. "We have preparations to make," she murmured against his mouth. "Mercenaries to greet." "And a planet to heal," Morgan added, thinking of the terraforming compounds. They gathered the settlement's leaders in the command center, outlining their defense strategy. The bunker's automated systems would provide their primary firepower, but everyone would need to participate. "The mercenaries are coming for me and the technology," Morgan explained, "but they'll have to go through all of us to get either. And they'll find that we're no longer the desperate, hungry beings they expect," Dren added, his forearms crossing resolutely. As the meeting concluded, Trill approached with updated scans. "The terraforming compounds are even more promising than we thought," she reported excitedly. "With modifications to the replicator, we could begin atmospheric processing within days." "First, we survived the mercenaries," Morgan reminded her. "Then we saved the planet." That night, as final preparations were made for the coming battle, Morgan and Sarah found a rare moment alone in their quarters. The former storage room they now shared, made comfortable with salvaged furnishings. "I never expected this," Sarah admitted as they lay together, her emerald skin contrasting beautifully against the simple white sheets. "When I was assigned to Proxima 9, I thought it would be just another mission. Observe, report, move on." Morgan traced the curve of her shoulder, marveling at how natural it felt to be with her, despite their different species. "And I thought I'd just be feeding people, not starting a revolution, fighting off mercenaries and terraforming a planet." "Humans," Sarah chuckled, her fingers playing across his chest, "always exceeding expectations." Their lovemaking that night was tender yet passionate, a celebration of life in the face of coming danger, a promise of a future worth fighting for. As dawn broke over Proxima 9, Morgan stood at the edge of the hilltop, watching the blood-orange sky. Soon it would be filled with mercenary ships, bringing violence and destruction. But for the first time since arriving on this desolate world, he felt something unexpected. Hope. The mercenary ships descended through Proxima 9's dusty atmosphere like predatory birds, their weapon systems already charging. Morgan watched from the bunker's command center, his jaw set with determination as he finalized the defense protocols. 6 minutes to engagement range, Trill reported, her scaled fingers dancing across the tactical console. "Colonial cruiser is hailing us again," Sarah added from her station. Lieutenant Commander Hale's face appeared on the main screen, her expression unreadable. "Reed, I've spoken with command. Your request for reassignment has been, conditionally approved." Morgan raised an eyebrow. "Conditionally? We're designating Reed's Haven as an official colonial outpost, with you as its administrator." A hint of a smile touched Hale's stern features. "Apparently someone at HQ was impressed by your innovative approach to post-war reconstruction." "And the current situation?" Morgan pressed, gesturing toward the incoming hostiles. "We've been authorized to provide full support." Hale's smile widened fractionally. "Consider this your welcome to colonial governance." The tactical display shifted as the cruiser broke orbit, descending rapidly toward the mercenary formation. Its superior firepower immediately changed the equation, forcing the mercenary ships to scatter. "They're breaking formation," Trill announced excitedly. 3 ships are retreating." "The others are still coming," Sarah cautioned. "They must be the more desperate ones, or the better armed." Morgan studied the tactical display, noting the approach vectors of the remaining ships. "They're trying to flank us, using the ridge for cover from the cruiser." He turned to Kel. "Time to use our secret weapon." Kel grinned. "About damn time." He moved to a separate console that Morgan had discovered hidden behind a false panel, a prototype defense system that Colonial Command had been developing before the war-forced evacuation. "What is that?" Sarah asked, watching as Kel activated the system. "Gravitational disruptor," Morgan explained. "Experimental tech that never made it into production. It creates localized gravity wells, like miniature black holes that last just long enough to tear a ship apart." "And you were saving this because—" Sarah crossed her arms, one silver eyebrow arched. Morgan shrugged. "It's unstable. One-time use, and it draws power directly from the bunker's core, which means temporarily shutting down all other systems, including life support. So we'll be defenseless and unable to breathe," Dren summarized dryly. "Wonderful plan." "For about 90 seconds, Morgan confirmed. "But those ships will be scrap metal." The decision was made quickly. As the mercenary vessels approached their attack position, Morgan gave the order to evacuate all non-essential personnel from the bunker. He, Sari, and Kel would remain to manage the gravitational disruptor. "Firing in 3, 2, 1. Kel initiated the sequence. The bunker went dark as all power diverted to the experimental weapon. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then through the viewport, they saw it. a shimmering distortion in the air above the ridge, like heat waves but more pronounced. The distortion expanded rapidly, engulfing the area where the mercenary ships were maneuvering. Metal screamed as the ships were caught in the artificial gravity well. One by one, they crumpled like paper toys in a giant's fist, their hulls collapsing inward before the entire mass imploded with a flash of energy. "Holy shit," Kel breathed, watching the destruction. The bunker remained dark, emergency chemical lights casting eerie shadows as they waited for the systems to reboot. Morgan moved to Sarah's side, taking her hand in the dim light. 90 seconds, he reminded her as the air grew stale. At 87 seconds, the lights flickered back on. The environmental systems hummed to life, fresh air flowing through the vents. The tactical display reactivated, showing the debris field where the mercenary ships had been, and something else. "We've got movement," Trill called out. "Survivors!" There. They're hailing us." The face that appeared on the communications screen was that of a grizzled mercenary captain, a reptilian alien with scarred scales and cybernetic enhancements. "That was impressive," the mercenary growled. "Never seen anything like it." "Surrender or join the debris field," Morgan replied coolly. The mercenary captain barked a laugh. "With what ship?" "You tore mine to pieces." He paused, seeming to consider his options. "I've got 30 crew with various skills, engineers, medics, security. Thax's credits aren't worth dying for." "You're offering to switch sides?" Sarah asked skeptically. "I'm offering to survive," the captain corrected, "and maybe help build something for once, instead of tearing it down. Gets tiring after a while." Morgan exchanged glances with Sarah, who gave a subtle nod. "Report to the settlement perimeter for processing," Morgan instructed. "Any weapons will be confiscated. You'll be on probation, but everyone works, everyone eats." "Sounds fair," the mercenary agreed. "Captain Dorn at your service." As the communication ended, Lieutenant Commander Hale hailed them again. "Reed, situation report?" "Threat neutralized," Morgan confirmed. "We've got survivors requesting asylum." Hale's eyebrows rose. "Mercenaries wanting to settle down? That's a new one." "This place has a way of changing people," Morgan replied, glancing at Sarah with a smile. 6 months later, Morgan stood on the hilltop, marveling at the transformation. The terraforming compounds had worked beyond their expectations. The immediate area around Reed's Haven now boasted actual greenery, hardy plants engineered to thrive in the recovering soil. The perpetual dust clouds had thinned enough that, on good days, the true color of the sky was visible, a deep, vibrant blue that still startled him when he glimpsed it. The settlement had expanded dramatically. Former mercenaries had proven to be skilled builders and engineers, accelerating the construction of permanent structures. Captain Dorn had become Morgan's chief of security, his knowledge of Syndicate operations proving invaluable in establishing trade routes with neighboring settlements. And at the center of it all, where his humble food stall had once stood, now rose Reed's, a proper restaurant and community center combined. The replicator provided basic nutrition for everyone, but Morgan still cooked special meals by hand, using ingredients grown in the settlement's new hydroponic gardens. "Admiring your handiwork?" Sarah's voice came from behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing against his back. "Our handiwork," he corrected, turning to face her. The past months had changed her too, her silver hair longer now, often braided with colorful threads gifted by grateful settlers. Her emerald skin seemed to glow with health and happiness. "The colonial liaison is here," she informed him. "Lieutenant Commander Hale wants to discuss expanding the terraforming operation to the eastern regions." Morgan nodded. "I'll be right there." As Sarah turned to go, he caught her hand. "Wait, there's something I've been meaning to ask you." From his pocket, he produced a small object, a ring fashioned from a piece of the first mercenary ship they destroyed together. The metal polished to a mirror shine. "I know it's not a tradition in your culture," he said, suddenly nervous, "but in mine it symbolizes a permanent bond." Sarah's violet eyes widened, then softened with understanding. "Are you asking me to be your mate, Morgan Reed?" "My wife," he corrected gently. "Yes." Her answer came not in words, but in a kiss that left no doubt about her feelings. When they finally parted, both breathless, she slipped the ring onto her finger. It fits perfectly, she murmured. I had help, Morgan admitted. Trill has been measuring your fingers while you sleep. Sarah laughed, the sound like music to his ears. Sneaky human. Hand in hand, they walked back toward the settlement, toward the future they were building together. As they passed Reed's, Morgan glanced at the sign above the entrance, where someone had added a subtitle that made him smile every time he saw it. Reed's After the Apocalypse. His food stall has everything. And looking at Sarah, at the thriving community around them, at the gradually healing world beneath his feet, Morgan knew it was true. He had everything he could ever want. And it had all started with a simple act of kindness to a hungry alien girl. You know, Sarah said thoughtfully as they walked, I never did thank you properly for that first meal you gave me. Morgan grinned, remembering their beginning. As I recall, you offered quite enthusiastically. And you refused, she reminded him, her violet eyes twinkling. Said I didn't need to do that. Best decision I ever made, Riri, Morgan replied, pulling her close for another kiss. Around them, Reed's Haven continued to grow and thrive, a testament to human compassion, alien resilience, and the universal truth that sometimes the path to saving a world begins with simply feeding a hungry stranger.